Hey, welcome back to The Urban Monk. Dr. Pedram Shojai here with my good buddy Jeff Hayes, who is a rebel, upstart, awesome filmmaker who's just doing some really meaningful work and is just bold about what he's doing. We covered all kinds of stuff, but it's really about how documentary and independent films are changing the landscape and bringing the conversation to center because there's so much money driving the market and driving politics and driving stuff towards things that we're led to believe are true and towards things that people want us to believe are true. And so it's this independent voice of cinema, film, and the internet. We covered a lot of cool stuff. I know you're going to enjoy it. Let's go to Jeff Hayes. Oh man, so I'm just going to jump in and we're going to play and we'll go from there. So Jeff, it is so good to see you, man. We've been hanging a fair amount lately. We got this kind of codenamed Rebel Alliance that we're putting together for film production, and I gotta say it's one of the things I'm the most excited about in a while. So you got some cojones on you, man. Like you're out there making serious movies and throwing some gauntlets. How did you get into this mess? Like what got you to get into making movies that make movements?
You know, it's funny that when I was 25 years old, I'm 57 now. When I was 25 years old, I thought, okay, I'm a quarter of a century old. I need to have a philosophy of life. I literally had to choose one. And I had been to the Success Motivation Institute in Waco, Texas, when I was like 23, and I heard a phrase there. They had two business criteria. They wanted to make an impact and they wanted to make a profit. And I didn't really know what that meant, but it stuck with me. So when I was 25, I wrote that down and said, okay, this I believe in. I want to make an impact and I want to make a profit. And I literally adopted that, and it's from the search for believing in nothing to finding something to believe in, that really did stick. And so when you look at, there's lots of ways to be in the film business. There's lots of things you can do for money. But to have that, I want to make an impact and I want to make a profit for doing it. Sometimes I'm better at making an impact. Sometimes I'm better at making a profit.
Totally.
But those are really the goals. The type films I do are things that I get led to. I look for disenfranchised voices, people who don't have anybody to speak for them. And that appeals to me. It may be stuck in the rescuing damsels in distress, but
yeah, but you know what? You've been good at that, and it's very fun to see like where your projects go because you're kind of all over the map, and it's interesting because you have a lot of passions. Give us a list real quick, just for our viewers or listeners, of just the work that you've done. Just name out some titles because they've probably heard of them.
well, let's go back. Let's start because it's you, and let's start with the embarrassing stuff. In the early '90s, I started a company called Capstone Entertainment, and we made a film, shot it like a TV series, on film instead of on a stage. It was for kids, teaching them how to stay safe from strangers, and it was called Get Street Smart: A Kid's Guide to Stranger Dangers. And you can actually find clips of it on YouTube making fun of me for having done that. Amazingly enough, we partnered with Dr. Laura Schlesinger back before Dr. Laura was Dr. Laura, and we sold $10 million worth of that the first year. So it actually did okay. I did a film in 2004 called Fahrenheit 9/11. It was a Republican response to Michael Moore's movie Fahrenheit 9/11. Now, the thing nobody knows about is the movie was all financed by Democrats. It literally was just, it was a marketing film in that we saw nobody had stepped into this breach. Somebody got to have one side of the conversation, but there was nobody speaking for the other side. And so the film, Overstock.com bought it from me for $2.6 million the day I finished it. That bought me the next year to do what I wanted to do, and I did a film called On Native Soil that was the documentary of the 9/11 Commission report. If you remember the 9/11 Commission report, a 650-page government-issued book came out and sold 1 million copies. Well, it turns out if you turn to the copyright page on that book, there was no copyright. We, the American people, own it. And so it dawned on me, if I can be first, I have just acquired the rights to a New York Times best-selling book for nothing. And so we made an announcement in the Hollywood Reporter that we are making the documentary, the 9/11 Commission report. I got Kevin Costner and Hilary Swank to narrate it. And we did that film from the viewpoint of the women primarily who caused the government to back down and actually form a commission to find out why their family members died. So we told it through their eyes, the formation of the commission and what the commission learned. I got shortlisted for an Academy Award for the film, and I've been resting on that small laurel ever since. But recently I did a film called Doctored about alternative medicine. I've got a sequel to it coming out called Undoctored. And then I did a film called Bought that's been justifiably controversial about big pharma vaccines and GMOs. And that was to try to create a space to have an intelligent conversation about these really contentious issues.
Yep. Most people don't touch that shit. You know, it's really easy to stay safe. You know, you got advertisers, you got people that kind of write your checks in traditional media, and people don't really like controversy. The status quo is kind of where everything is, and that's why a lot of media is boring. So the fact that you threw that gauntlet is, again, a testament to your cojones. And, you know, I thought it was a well-made movie, and it brought up a lot of very important points and questions we need to ask as a society about what we're doing and what we're mandating as kind of standard issue stuff for our children and our loved ones, and whether or not there's some science versus sanity to it. So I think that you know, again, it's easy to do the easy stuff, right? And so I'm sure you've caught some flack for it.
Oh, yeah. This is, you know, and this issue especially. I mean, I have relatives that just don't even want to speak to me. And, you know, meanwhile, we filmed at Harvard, we filmed at MIT, we filmed at University of Kentucky, we filmed at Purdue, at the University of Wales. It's not like, you know, we're out tracking down internet rumors. You know, we filmed some of the best scientists in the world, and it's funny. There's a phrase that I'm going to try to not ever use again, and that is the research says, or well, the research shows that blank. Because those, when you say those statements, you're basically saying this is closed, everything is in. And what we discovered is the research is all over the map. I can get you brilliant scientists from major universities on both sides of both the GMO and the vaccine issue, and on each individual vaccine issue. And so even at this point, I've studied it more than anybody I know. I don't know for a fact anything, but I do know we should not be saying science is closed on this issue, the sky is blue, the earth is round, vaccines save lives. You know, it's like, wait a minute, that's an oversimplification that injures people.
Let's talk about that for a second, because there's this like journalistic excellence kind of space where you can hang out and be like, look, I don't know the answers, and we're going to start asking provocative questions because it's been one-sided one way or the other. And then there's the kind of hired gun documentarian thing that happens as well. And there's a lot of slanted media out there. There's a lot of people who have a dog in the race that are trying to like make movies to support causes that they believe in, and kind of use it as propaganda. And I'd love to hear your opinion about what that world looks like.
It's always follow the money, and it's very tempting. And there's money on both sides of these fights. And so I have a friend who's spending nearly $1 million making a pro-GMO movie. He was inspired by me making the film Bought. He thinks I'm wrong. And he raised $1 million in, you know, like a month. but he's also in the business of selling data to farmers. And so he raised money from farmers who make their living from planting GMO crops that don't want their world rocked. And so, they have a very slanted point of view. He's not open to a discussion. This takes time. This morning, I read in the Wall Street Journal that McDonald's is switching to not buying anything but cage-free produced eggs. I mean, do you realize how profound that is? When McDonald's, I can't imagine how many millions of dozens of eggs they buy. They've shifted to selling breakfast anytime, all day. And now they're saying, we're not buying caged produced eggs. My belief as I was reading that article was you can trace that to Food Inc. That this film out there that risked showing how this is really happening. I mean, when it's illegal to show now, you can't go film the way we're raising poultry or pigs, or slaughterhouses for cow. It's astounding. To heck with your First Amendment rights. You can't show people what we're doing to feed ourselves. Then they got that done, and this started a movement that continues without them, that now I don't think you get any more mainstream. When you have Walmart saying we're not going to sell chicken with antibiotics in it, okay, now we're hitting a real critical mass. So that's what I love, is to say where you and I can make a film that 10 years from now has impacted so many more people than we would have a right to imagine. It's astounding.
Yeah, you know what, it really is, and I don't know of a time in history ever since the printing press, when Gutenberg kind of changed things around, right, that fundamentally pivoted an entire industry to the point where small guys can get out there and really carry the message of the few, and really change things. So I mean, you're tracing this back to Food Inc. That is a huge gauntlet that they threw, and they've been doing this for a while. I mean, I was on with Alex Jamieson earlier today, who did Super Size Me, and
Yep.
There's these influential documentaries. They don't make that much money, but they move minds, and I'd love to talk about that, because it seems like the battle for the future of this planet is the battle for the minds of men and women, right? And us being able to put different forms of information and intelligence in front of people to make some of their own decisions is moving industry, is moving markets. And that, I mean, the fact that those chicken farmers are doing something differently is going to have a fallout that is just massive.
News in 1200 AD was carried by usually singers and entertainers going from community to community and carrying news with them. And so there's been this filtration, and then you have the printing press, but the power resided then with the press, and the press could sway what people thought. If you think back when now we know of John Kennedy and his philandering, the press knew about it then. They would never have uttered a word of, he could safely walk into a bar with Marilyn Monroe and sit and with his arm around her all night, and it just didn't make the papers, no matter how much of the press was in there. And I think back in the 40s, where you go to the movie and there's a newsreel. Well, today the boys landed on Norm. And it's like this filtered from the government down. Well, with each thing, books, the press gave the ability to communicate books. Each has their own unique capabilities. The radio, suddenly, the radio, well, when television came out, baseball dropped in popularity and football rocketed in popularity because it made for better pictures. There are qualities and distinctions of each media that cause different things to happen. And so there was a point where direct mail. I was visiting with a political guy who's widely credited for getting Reagan elected, and the way he did it is he went around the establishment. The establishment wanted Bob Dole, they wanted other Republican leaders, and didn't want Reagan. He bypassed them, and through direct mail, he assembled by hand mail addresses, and was able to directly influence, and Reagan's money came in $20 to $50 at a time, and he literally won the election on that. So with direct mail, suddenly communication was increased in the ability to do this. Now all of a sudden you have the internet, and they've got guys like you and I on, where we've got access to put our films on the internet. The thing that makes the internet unique is the interactivity. And
Yep.
so this suddenly the playing field is not level, but it's leveling out. I don't have $4 billion a year to spend on advertising the way big pharma does, but our message is starting to be virally spread and starting to say, I was talking to a friend today who just started his son on Adderall. And, you walk into a room with 7 smart, caring people who are all of the mentality that there's something wrong with your child, and the answer is likely to be found in a bottle of pills. And he's telling me, I'm like, well, I didn't think Mason had ADD, and he said, well, no, it's not ADD. He's a perfectionist, and because he's a perfectionist, he'll take half of a test. He gets high anxiety, and he'll do half of it perfectly and not finish the whole test. And I had to say, I'm like, okay, based on what you just told me, do you really think there's a pill that would solve that? I mean, we have been so brainwashed to just look for a solution. That word getting out there, we have the tools now to do this. It's going to take some time, and we're combating somebody who is winning this war with money. But man, it is hard to outspend free. And
Yep.
when you have hundreds of thousands of shares on Facebook for the work you do, I have hundreds of thousands of shares. You'll see us in the next 12 months have millions of shares for our work. If somebody's going to be paying money to try to compete with us, it starts to get expensive for them.
That's right.
This is a unique time.
It really is. And, if you're listening or listening to this and watching this and thinking, okay, well, how can I be a part of this solution? When you see work that you like, share it and help push it along, because, there is no huge pharma budget behind independent documentaries. And it's literally the voice of the First Amendment, because capitalism has bought the message, right? Capitalism can work its way up through Capitol Hill and get lobbyists and all this stuff. And the internet has really evened out the playing field in a way where, dissenting voices or independent voices or just concerned parents can say, hey, wait a minute, right? And that, hey, wait a minute is part of this democracy. It's part of how our society is supposed to run, so that we can have free spreading knowledge of information that helps us make informed decisions and not be led to decisions.
Yeah, if you look at the vaccine argument, the deck is stacked right now, and that the CDC has gone to the media and said, if you give a voice to these anti-vaccine people, you're literally killing children. And so you just don't see stories picked up about the negative of vaccines. And so without it, that's just an accurate observation of fact. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. In that environment, what's been lost is the ability to have a vaccine safety discussion. And you have a lot of MDs who know to just keep their head down and their mouth shut if they question the vaccine schedule. So having a voice for these issues where people can have a safe place to have a conversation, where parents can make the decision for themselves of, okay, this is what I want to do in my family. Boys have a different reaction to vaccines than girls do in terms of the risk profile. some parents will decide to delay for boys, not for girls. I mean, there's a myriad of ways to handle it, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it doesn't happen by just repeating a lie that all vaccines are safe and effective all the time, where there's no expert that would sit in a room and tell you, yes, all vaccines are safe and effective all the time. It just, that's one of the biggest lies that's ever. So somehow, voices like yours and mine are a counterbalance to some what I look for are some overweighted conversations where somebody on the game has too much money and is paying for an outcome.
And so it's actually like a market correction in a very kind of democratic way.
Yeah, it's like shorting a stock if we were in the market. We're the guys that go, wait a minute. I think this company's lying about their financials. It
Right.
always cracks me up. I was reading something the other day that said, there's a lot of money in the anti-GMO movement, and they're currently winning the argument. And I'm like, wow, who would write such a thing? When you look at the money that comes in when we're not talking about banning GMOs, we're talking about just labeling them.
Mm-hmm.
And in Washington State, we filmed what happened in Washington State, where you had the entire amount of money raised in Washington State for the pro GMO side was $500.
Come
At
on.
$500. Every other dollar of 12 million came from outside of the state of Washington. And then they outspent the group that wanted labeling. They outspent them 2-1. But you talk about an election that was bought. When you got, okay, the citizens of Washington vote with your dollars, they get one $500 vote, and $6 million raised was to try to label, and then they were still outspent 2-1. That's when the market needs someone like you or I to come in and rabble rouse.
Yeah, yeah, and look, it's what was kind of the foundational premise of this democracy and kind of stepping out of the tyranny of the old world was to have freedom of speech and just have discourse, right? I'm not jumping up and down saying my way or the highway, but I'd like to know what the dissenting side says, because there's some place in the middle where there's a rational conversation that can be had. And I think the political process is very polarizing, and there's a lot of these companies have a dog in the race, so it's really hard to take information as it is, because science is also bought. For every study out there, there's people that fund the studies, and so if you're working for an oil company, chances are you're not going to have a job if you come up with some sort of anti-oil evidence, and that's just part of the deal, right? That's just follow the money, like you said.
Werner Erhard says all organizations eventually turn evil. And what he means by evil in that context is that they start serving themselves instead of serving the people they were meant to serve. You and I have talked about, B Corps and conscious capitalism, and I'm so excited about what you're doing in that area. It is, you talk about a place for a movement to start to move people toward, okay, wait a minute, we're not just accountable to shareholders, we're accountable to stakeholders, and stakeholders is the community that we reside in, it's our employees, it's our customers, it's the state that we're in, it's the environment that we have around us.
The fish, the
And
birds.
it's like I was at a fundraiser for Robert Kennedy for his Waterkeeper Alliance, and the guy was so brilliant. They go out and sue people that are polluting, and that's every dollar raised. They sue people are polluting, and so he's obviously a very liberal company. He's, I don't know if you can think of a more liberal family than the Kennedys. Here's Robert Kennedy Jr., and he said the solution to our environmental problems is a free market and free market capitalism. And really, and he said, here's the reason why: the cost of building your product includes cleaning up a mess if you make one. And if you create a product that creates a mess for the public and you leave it for the public to pay, that's a government subsidy. You're having the government pay for the cost of creating your product, which is the opposite of free market capitalism. And he's right. So what I loved about it is, wow, you take, as a free market capitalist, how am I going to argue with him? It's like, yeah, I will take that liberal, free capital, capitalistic stance. That's the right move. And that's, as we move towards stakeholder thinking, that becomes almost automatic. I'm excited to see what movement you create around that.
Yeah, and what Jeff's alluding to is something that's been rumbling under the belly of this beast over here. Is we have a movie on that subject coming next year, and man, I got to say, every interview that I do, every contact that I'm introduced to that helps further that conversation, makes me more proud to be someone who can tell this story at this time in human history. Like there is a renaissance.
You're giving it a voice, and maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it. I didn't mean to make an announcement for you, but
no, it's all right, man. We've been alluding to it, but we've been kind of, it's happening. It's happening now. But you know what it takes to make a movie. I mean, first you spend a lot of time making friends and kind of figuring out who's on what side of the argument and who's talking shit and who's actually like, a reasonable, sensible voice in this that, is doing it for all the right reasons.
Well, I got to tell you, this is one, it's ripe for a movement. And this is one that I think 10 years from now, we're going to be able to look back and you're going to be able to go, okay, you see that little blip in the marketplace? That was me, where I changed the trajectory. It's funny. If I would have brought a prop down, I have I took a full page ad out in the USA Today after we ran the Fahrenheit movie, and it said, "You're welcome, Mr. President." Then I ran my reviews from Variety and the New York Times for Fahrenheit, but I went ahead and took credit for the president winning that election. I figured, well, somebody has to take credit for it. It might as well be me.
That's hilarious.
So some of them are completely out of the bounds of reality. But I think you're going to be able to look back and say, okay, some trajectories changed, and you can trace it back to something that I helped give a voice to that needed a voice to strengthen it. And that's
the promise, right?
That's what we're doing.
That's the promise. I mean, I would love to train 100,000 more well-intentioned people to learn how we do what we do to help make movies that matter.
Oh man, and what's great about it? This is the right time to do that, because the millennials that are coming up, this is a group of people that. And one of their characteristics is the work they're looking for must have meaning. And this is a good generation to work with. I support you, and I want to be involved with you in recruiting, training, and unleashing capable filmmakers to take on these issues.
Well, I mean, that's just it, right? Like, I mean, you got this thing right here. And for those of you who are just listening, I'm holding up my iPhone. There's enough technology in the pocket of the pants that you're wearing right now to capture stories and move things. But just, there needs to be some training and a little bit of discipline in filmmaking and kind of narratives and arcs and all this kind of stuff, or else it's just, kind of clumsy YouTube videos. And so, I think, we'll huddle offline and have a conversation about how to help people do that, because I think that's a worthwhile project. Because you and I,
it multiplies our efforts.
That's it. And look, at the end of the day, I work for Mother Earth. You work for your grandchildren's grandchildren. And so This isn't about me. I don't really care to be like, I don't need to be the guy in history books. But, I want to make sure my kid has a tree to climb. I want to make sure that there's lakes that we can enjoy generations from now. And, this world is worth fighting for. And we can do this. Within this generation, we have the power and the capacity via the internet and how this kind of disintermediation has happened with the studios and all the stuff that's kind of fallen out of the middlemen, like the Wizard of Oz is kind of like gone. So we can do this, and we are doing this, and I'd love to help empower more and more people to do what you and I do.
As you're talking, I used to have the phrase, I would say, God bless the lunatic fringe.
Yeah.
and there are people and I won't get into any specifics, but because I film a lot of activists, as I film them, I began to wonder, was anybody normal? And I started to notice amongst these activists, these are people that get agitated easier than I do. They get upset easier, and then I tend to blow things off, and like I don't have the ability to hold a grudge. It's just not my. I like people, and I also have the great skill of denial, and I just make things all right, and so these are people that they get agitated easily and they stay agitated, and 3 years or 30 years later they're still agitated.
Hmm.
And these are the people that sometimes they're so forceful they push people away. That every time you have dinner with them, they beat you up about the latest vaccine news, or they beat you up about the bad things on your plate, or they beat you up. They just are relentless. And we're able to, they're also gathering incredible data. And so we're able to take those people and put their information in a format and back it off a little bit to make it palatable to get their message out there.
Hmm.
And it's I view these people as the canaries in the coal mine. We as a society, we have to have them. We need somebody like Robert Kennedy Jr. that says, no, I'm going to make my life's work not letting companies that don't care about the environment kill the environment around them. And,
Mm-hmm.
this was his issue 20 years ago. It'll be his issue 20 years from now. God bless him for doing that, and the people, and I don't want to call him lunatic fringe because there's people that are way outside it, but these people who are making their life's work, that's not me. My goal is to point my camera at them for a while, give them a tool, and then I want to move on and do it for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in a society. There has to be guys that go out and scout over the next hill and come back and say, "Hey, I found the land of milk and honey. It's right over here. We can make it." And I view that that's my role and that's my sweet spot. That's where I find joy. Um, and my capabilities are increasing. I'm watching your capabilities increase, and a few of the people that we work with and know. I can't wait to see what we do 5 years from now.
That's it. That's it. I mean, we got a mutual friend, Nick Polizzi, who's done this great movie about shamanism, and it's just crushing it on the internet because it's just like this groundswell of enthusiasm around natural medicine and kind of the promise of natural medicine. And he's just, he's the messenger. He's really brought this together. He like hosted the party, but it struck a nerve, and it's so delightful to see this happening around us. And like Nick's work is phenomenal. I highly recommend everyone. Actually, we did an episode with him on being a dad, and I highly recommend checking out his movie. He's just a good dude trying to do the right thing for his kid in the world. And so, my question to you now is, where do you see this going, Jeff? There's this arc of media and the internet and kind of this disintermediation. Like, it's just getting easier and easier to do. So where do you think quality filmmaking is going, and how people are going to consume this stuff in the next 10, 20 years?
So, two parts to that answer. So first off, with going back to where you're talking about Nick Polizzi, is when you and I were talking to him together recently, and he talked about how surprised he was. He thought his world would be he's going to make that movie. He'll make a movie a year, release it, and then next year another movie, release it next year. And now it's been 3 years since he released Sacred Science, and he had more views of it this summer than he did 3 summers ago. It's like it's growing, and so that's the key, is doing something that has quality, that will live, that will then spread on its own. And so the second part of my answer is I remember when VCRs first came out, and we went and bought our big old VCR that the tray came up. You were a kid. I was an adult. And these old VCRs, and you go down and to rent, and these people, entrepreneurs would throw up a little video rental store, and you'd go in and they'd have 40 to 60 movies, and that literally was all the movies that were available on videotape at that time. And so you start out, you're watching great stuff. Oh, Amadeus, I'll take that. And, next thing you know, you're watching, cartoons or some of the stupidest things just because there was nothing available. Well, when the internet started distributing content, there wasn't that much available. That's changing day by day, and now there's an onslaught of content. So now we have a time where quality is going to start to surge. People are going to have to do a good job on it. That's when capable filmmaking, people need to get their skills in order. They need to pay the price to learn, simple things like lighting, incredible things like story and story arc. People aren't just going to watch it because, hey, look, I got video on the internet. And so I think quality is going to win. I think we're going to have people show up that I'm already seeing. I watched some video yesterday of somebody, you just go, wow, look at this kid. He's figuring it out early. I can't wait to see these guys unleashed into this medium.
Yeah, and the problem was with this push media of television. It's like you come home, you microwave your dinner, you plop down, and you see what you see the best of the worst that's available to shovel into your brain because there's nothing else. I mean, it's the same kind of VCR equivalent that kind of crossed over into TV, and now there's content for everybody. It's really interesting, and there is a lot of garbage, and I do think that there's going to be a race to the top in terms of quality and just because people are used to quality entertainment. The internet is fresh, but you're not always going to catch a sneezing panda. You're not always going to catch the blooper. So if you're actually going to produce stuff for the internet, you better know what the hell you're doing, and you better understand what people are looking for and what the problems that people are engaged in are, so that you can intercept those and be of service. Because watching you walk around the mall on Periscope really isn't that interesting. And eventually, real people are going to show up doing real stuff on Periscope that's going to be way more worth watching.
Well, I pay my monthly Netflix subscription. I have never watched a movie on Netflix. I consume their original programming. And it's like, man, I love the stuff. I binge watch it. It's the way I like to watch stuff. 3 or 4 episodes, last night, bleary-eyed. I'm like, okay, just one more, and then I swear I'm gonna stop. And so when you've got companies like Netflix and Amazon throwing real money into this game and doing really quality, the audience is starting to demand quality information and content in a way that they want to consume it. So this is a good time to be us.
Yeah, and then you still have a chance to have your own channel. I mentioned this on a different show, but I'll say it again here. The reach of your website is infinite if you're on the World Wide Web. So if you have good content, your website is a distribution channel / network for whatever it is you want to say and do. And so it's a really powerful tool because you don't actually need to be in a million places and be intermediated. You need good stuff, and you have to know how to really get in the flow of traffic so people hear about it, share about it, and get in front of you. So knowing how to use social media and the internet at large actually comes in really handy, and it's not like, oh, pop, I'm going to put up a website and bam, here it goes. So there are some skills, and I don't want to be flippant about it because you got to learn a couple things, but once you do, man, the sky's the limit in this world.
Well, I had a conversation yesterday with your friend James in Australia, from Food Matters, and they have their channel Food Matters TV, and he's paying filmmakers more than they're getting paid to have their film on his little channel. Filmmakers are making more money than they make in a 2-year contract with Netflix. And this was something, what did he launch that a year ago? Didn't exist a year ago.
Yeah,
So
he's crushing it. And what did he start with? He started with one movie, and then he went to Hungry for Change, and he kept going from there. And I mean, James is a great guy, and I, you know, to use your term, is he's moving the conversation forward, which is, I think, a really important contribution to humanity. Is, you know, this is a body of work, and we're gonna figure out how to make life better for all of us by speaking to the smart people that have something important to say. So, man, I really love what you're doing. I know you got a sequel to your doctored movie coming out called Undoctored. You want to talk about that quickly?
Yeah, it's funny. We got a chance to get feedback on Doctored, and it's like, if we got to do it over again, what would we do? And that's what we did for the sequel. It's a beautiful story, and it's a well done film. I'm really proud of it. It's going to be of specific interest to, of all people, chiropractors, but it's a story what happened to them with traditional medicine, and then played out. It just so happens that one of the doctors that we filmed in that, it turned out to be a miracle himself. You know, he's one of the most amazing people I've ever known as a healer. And we filmed him doing some incredible things. He ended up having a heart attack and being in a coma for over a month. Anyway, so it's just a real great sequel. I'll end up doing some short films to follow, or, you know, just short, about like 3-minute, 5-minute films telling stories of, you know, follow-up of one of the people in Undoctored. But I can't wait for you to see it.
Wow.
I'm excited to hear what you think about it. I think we've done a really great job with it.
Fantastic. I know you're a stickler for quality, so I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Man, I love what you're doing. I think we should huddle up and see how we can help other filmmakers on this. I love that conversation. And just tell people where they could find you, your movies, whatever.
Yeah, so the easiest way is jeffhayesfilms.com, and you can link to just about everything from there. On Native Soil, I sold to Lionsgate. And so, you know, some of the stuff you find at Amazon, you know, Doctored, if you're a Prime, Amazon Prime, you can see Doctored on Amazon Prime. But you can link to everything from jeffhayesfilms.com, and there's not an E in Hayes, Hays.
Yep.
My family couldn't afford the extra vowel, so
I got to say, I had it wrong in my cell phone for a while, so I've corrected that in the last few months.
Yeah, I've seen people spell it in the same document, you know, Hays, Hayes, and, you know, and over, just rotating them. So it doesn't much matter.
Yeah, try having a name like Pedram. Cool, man. Well, thanks for stopping by. I love what you're doing. Keep up the good work, and I hope to call you back in, and let's keep talking about this. I love your movies, and I love what you're doing.
Great, thank you. It was a blast to be here.
So I hope you enjoyed Jeff Hayes. I love that guy. He is just a powerhouse, and he's doing some wonderful work. Check out his films. Check out what he's doing. He's someone to watch. If you like this, just go ahead and love up the show, please. Like I said, it's a new show. Daddy needs all the love he can get. I'm trying to figure out what directions to take this in, but right now I'm just free-flowing and bringing in all the coolest friends I have and talking about stuff that I think is important. What do you think is important? Let me know. iTunes, YouTube, wherever you saw this. Give us a comment, give us a like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next show.